Aloha, this is State Representative Bob McDermott, and I'm thrilled today to be joined by Rear Admiral Cari Thomas, Coast Guard Commander, Pacific Region, District 14, right?
Correct.
And her husband, Gary Thomas, who's kind of the Coast Guard Lighthouse historian, if you will. And you were also a Coast Guardsman, correct?
That's correct.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you, especially because you guys are leaving this week, right?
It is.
And so you've been packing up, very busy.
2 years gone just like that. It's hard to believe.
So where are you going next?
So Washington, D.C., I'm going to be the head of human resources for the Coast Guard. About 66,000 employees, civilian, military, reservists, and broad portfolio from work-life to safety to medical, all the personnel policies, leadership, diversity, sexual assault prevention, response. Got a big job ahead of me.
It sounds like a very important job, one that I'm sure you're well suited for, but one that probably is not thought of as a glamorous position. Would that be kind of correct?
I was, when I got the orders there, I kept saying, you want me to do this job? But as I think about the portfolio, and as Gary reminded me and some of my other mentors reminded me, the importance of our workforce is so strategically important to us. And you can have all the nicest airplanes and boats, but if you don't have the people to operate or maintain them, they mean nothing.
No, well, that's true. I want to jump back now. I jumped ahead, but I want to go back to you, both of you, your history. So Gary, let me start with you. You were in the Coast Guard. What's your history?
I was. I'm a 1986 graduate of the Coast Guard Academy, and I spent the first quarter of my career driving boats. I was CO of a ship operating down in the Caribbean.
Does the Coast Guard call them ship or boats? The Navy calls them ships.
We call them cutters.
Cutters, okay.
And that's an old historic term back to the days of sailing ships.
Okay.
So anything larger than 65 feet and named as a cutter.
Okay.
And then the Coast Guard selected me for graduate school. I went to the University of Miami, and I got a master's in information technology. And then I went into software and hardware development for the Coast Guard for a while. And then I was a contingency planner. So I was in Florida for all of the hurricanes we had from 2004 to 2005.
Wow.
And then I deployed to Admiral Islands staff for Katrina and the recovery there. And then after that, I got back into electronic navigation. I was responsible for the radio navigation system known as LORAN throughout the U.S. and Canada, which I eventually shut down, and I finished my career as Chief of Electronic Navigation.
So you retired as a captain then?
Commander.
Commander, okay. How many years you put in?
24.
Okay. Admiral, your history.
1984 graduate of the Coast Guard Academy, came to the Coast Guard from Maryland. A number of ships along the way, was a ship captain as well. Did some assignments in personnel and training along the way. Ran our Coast Guard boot camp in Cape May, New Jersey for a couple of years, which was a really great assignment. You know, these men and women would get off the bus every week and they were a mess, and then 8 short weeks later they were absolutely amazing, and really privileged to have done that. Was selected to be an admiral while I was in that assignment. From there I went to Washington, D.C., where I did policy work on operations for the Coast Guard, helped negotiate a couple of international agreements while I was there, and then got my orders here to the Pacific. It's been really a great assignment.
So you two have had collectively between you probably 50 years of experience, maybe more.
Yeah.
And let's talk for a moment about the Coast Guard and the young people. What some of the viewers may not know is that you guys, the people you have enlisting coming into Cape May, a lot of them have college degrees.
All right.
I mean, your kids are off the charts smart. The Coast Guard is a very tough organization to get into. Gary, why don't you comment on that?
Well, I mean, it's changed a great deal from when we first joined, because I mean, I had junior enlisted on the first ship I served with who were given an option by a Texas judge of going to jail or joining the military. And they chose the Coast Guard over jail. It literally has evolved from that to the point now where our boot camp has people with master's degrees, post-studies doctoral candidates who simply have gotten to the point in their life where they feel a need to serve and give back. And so we have a great deal of very smart people, well motivated, and it is still hard to get in.
What is the, if you can recall, and I hate to put you on the spot, what is the ASVAB score to get in the Coast Guard?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I do know, though, the number of different programs that we have come in and are attracting all kinds of really interesting people. Just this morning, I heard from Senator Akaka's wife, who reminded me that her great-grandson is headed off to Cape May here in June, and he's going to be a student going to school here in Hawaii. Then he'll spend this summer at Cape May. He'll come back for the year. Then he'll go to the Coast Guard Academy, officer candidate school, graduate, and then head off to his career.
I know anecdotally the Coast Guard cutting scores to get in are probably at least 20 points higher, generally speaking, than the other services. That's not to say you can't get in with a lower score, but generally speaking, because the demand to join the Coast Guard is very high. When you have people with college degrees, and quite a few of them, I would guess 25% of your people coming in.
A decent number.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's so interesting is the Coast Guard portfolio of things that we're responsible for attracts a wide spectrum of people, right? So here I'm explaining to the kids at Prince Kuhio Elementary School. One of them asked me, what does the Coast Guard do? I said, that's a good question. I said, do you like a clean ocean or a dirty ocean? And they go, clean ocean. I said, well, that's right. And the Coast Guard keeps the ocean clean, and if it gets dirty, we clean it up. Then I said, okay, what happens if you're out on a boat and it gets a hole in it? And they said, well, you'll sink. I said, that's right. And so call the Coast Guard for help, and we're going to come get you. I said, but did you know that the Coast Guard is the police? And I said, are drugs good or are drugs bad? They go, drugs are bad. I said, that's right. And if the Coast Guard catches you with drugs on your boat, we're going to arrest you and take you to jail. And so it really shows the wide spectrum of things that the Coast Guard is responsible for. And so you can attract people of all different backgrounds and interests.
So if you're in college and you're trying to figure out what you want to do and you're a marine biology major, you can come in the Coast Guard and you can become a marine science technician, and you can be involved with cleanup of oil spills to preventative maintenance and things like that. If you're an engineer and you want to fix engines, you can be an engineer and do that, and everything in between.
And the duty stations are normally, right, pretty neat places. They're close to the ocean, because that's, for the most part, because that's what you do. So it could be New York City, could be where, San Diego, Long Beach.
Anywhere.
The Outer Banks of North Carolina.
Yeah.
Outer Banks, North Carolina. I mean, so these are all really neat places to go. I was a Marine, so it's not like it's Camp Lejeune, North Carolina.
Well, that's right. It's funny because when
it's not the Outer Banks, I can assure
when
you.
I went to the War College in Newport, Rhode Island, this Army guy had a big smile on his face the entire time he was there. So I finally asked him one day, why are you smiling all the time? He goes, you don't understand where Army bases are. He said, you think about how our country was formed. You know, we started on the east and we walked west until we got tired, and then we put down a flag. And then a couple of years later, we got up, we took that flag, we went west a little bit more until we got tired, and we put down another flag. And they're in important strategic locations around the nation, but he was very happy to be in Newport, Rhode Island.
Sure. I mean, they have, you know, the Army has Fort Irwin, the Marine Corps has 29 Palms. These are not, as much as they try and say it's beautiful, it's not a fun place. It's 120 degrees in the summer. Oh, but it's a dry heat, don't worry.
So's an oven.
Yeah, there you go. So's an oven. It is an oven. I've been there. So you guys have, so you have a lot, the diversity of opportunities plus the neat duty stations. That's why you have so many kids coming in. During the height of the Gulf War, you know, the Army was having trouble filling the recruiting mission. And they had raised the age, and I don't know if it's still there, but up to 40 years old you could enlist. That's a little long in the tooth, you know, 40. But if you can pass everything, I suppose it's okay. But Coast Guard didn't have to do that. Marine Corps didn't have to do that. Navy was meeting mission. And now this reverse thing is coming. So let me ask you this. As a policy person, it seems to me as an outsider, we're doing the same thing we always do after Vietnam or after the first Gulf War. We get real big, and then, okay, we got to shrink down. And maybe not in the Coast Guard, but in the other services, we're pushing out good people who want to stay, maybe they're not the cream of the crop, but they're good performers. But we have budget constraints now. We want to save money. We do this over and over, and then we have to ramp up again. What are your thoughts on that?
So the Coast Guard has a standard set of missions, whether we're wartime or not. And so the changes that occur to the Coast Guard tend to be very incremental in nature. And so we did our last big downsizing that we did was in the mid-90s with some of the budget challenges there. And we were on a scope to, we closed some bases and did some other things there. And then along came 9/11. And throughout my now 31 years wearing this uniform, I've seen the Coast Guard, we respond to sometimes disasters, whether it's the oil spill like in Exxon Valdez or 9/11 or other maritime catastrophes. And it helps get one of these mission sets more robust, and then along will come another disaster. And so the movements of the Coast Guard tend to not be as significant as they are for the other services, which is actually pretty good for us. Now we're in the middle now of recapitalizing all of our ships, and Congress found the wherewithal to fund a fleet of 8 large ships, of which 2 will be home ported here in Hawaii. That are going to be able to go and interoperate with whatever the Navy of the future really looks like, and we're very, very excited about that.
So Gary, tell me how you two met. Let's go back again. I'm bouncing all around, but that's okay. It's my show.
So she was 2 years senior to me, and so when you go to the Coast Guard Academy, your second class, which is your junior year, are responsible for the training of your first class or freshman year. So when I came into the academy, she was the group who were training us and introducing us into the academy mission. And so I was vaguely aware of her for the first year and tried to avoid her on occasion. But then on our summer cruise, we were assigned together on the Coast Guard Cutter Eagle, which is the Academy's training ship, 3-masted bark. And we ended up in the same watch section, again in a training role, her being then a first class, my being in a third class year. And we just got to know each other and discovered that we had a lot of common things that we valued and enjoyed our company. Mm-hmm. And after that, we were really friends for a while, and then suddenly one day we realized we were kind of dating.
Now 29 years later, here we are.
31 years later.
Well, since we met.
Yeah, 29 years. And coming up on
So you've been married 29.
Coming up on 29 next month.
Yep.
That's the same as my wife and I. I don't know if you guys ever did. I have a picture of my wife and I back 29 years ago. And I asked her, I said, what happened to that girl in that photo? You know what she says? Oh, she left with that guy. You mean I don't look the same? No, you don't.
Well, and unlike you, who chose to have 8 children, Gary and I just chose to have 1. And,
oh, really?
26 years old, lives back on the mainland, married now, and get en route as we speak.
We'll see her in a couple hours with her husband.
Getting off the airplane here.
Do you have any grandchildren?
Not yet. Not yet. But I am going to, on Thursday, publicly declare that when she does, I am to be called Tutu.
Okay. So how old is she? 26?
26.
So, okay, she has time.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. We have, let's see, two grandchildren right now. So, and I had just 2 sons got married. So, it is a blessing.
Yeah, it is.
And we were talking earlier before we came on how age changes your perspective on things, the lens that you view out of things you might have gotten upset about years ago.
Right.
Okay, that's human nature or whatever it is. Gary, I want to talk now. What a lot of people don't know is where you guys live. You have the choicest house on Diamond Head.
We do. We have the privilege, by virtue of her position as the District 14 commander, of living at the Diamond Head Lighthouse.
Can you tell me a little bit about the history of the lighthouse, Gary? Because you're kind of the lighthouse historian today. That's what we're going to call you.
Okay. So as early as 1850, the Royal Privy Council discussed the need for a lighthouse. Honolulu is really the only deep water natural port for the area here, and ships were running aground. Unfortunately, at the time, the Royal Hawaiian government didn't have a lot of money to build things. And you have to move forward to the point after the overthrow, and the Republic of Hawaii, shortly after they had established themselves, had a ship known as the Miawira run aground off Quarantine Island. And Quarantine Island is what we now know as Sand Island. The harbor was dredged and all the pumped sand was put on top of Quarantine Island. They renamed it Sand Island.
Oh, okay.
And the Miawira was from Australia, but she was still part of the British Empire at the time. And so they held a board of inquiry at the British Embassy here. And the finding of facts was that the master had miscalculated his position. He thought he was taking a bearing to the Diamond Head crater, and in fact was shooting somewhere in the mountains behind Wilhelmina Ridge, somewhere up in there. So they didn't hold him responsible because there was no aids to help him. And the last two paragraphs from Great Britain, which at the time is the world's maritime power, and this brand new republic wants recognition, it says, "We beg the government of Hawaii to put a lighthouse at Diamond Head," which caused lots of controversy and activity, and not much was actually done with it until 1897, a ship known as the China ran aground off of Waikiki. And that was important because the China was a Hawaiian flagged vessel. And it's kind of embarrassing when one of your flagships runs aground in its own home port. And so the merchants and the ship's captains literally went up the hill and started staking out around Diamond Head to build a lighthouse. And so the first lighthouse was built there in 1899. It was first light, which is the first time it was operational, was July 1st of 1899.
Is that the same building that's there today?
The building is not. If you've driven past there, you see as the upper two levels, which are circular, that's made by Honolulu Ironworks here on the island and all riveted together in place. And the original masonry structure was started falling apart. So what they did was they built a scaffolding around the upper two levels. They raised it up, literally, demolished the building below it, poured reinforced concrete for a new building, and then set the light back down on it. And it continued operating through the entire time. So the current structure now is coming up on 100 years old in 2017.
Wow. Now, is it still functional? I mean, do they still rely on it for navigation?
Absolutely.
That would be the smaller boats, I would guess.
All kinds of different ships. AIDS navigation's one of the critical things that keeps our waterways safe and secure, because you want the goods. You know, it's interesting to think about, where does this cup, how does it get to your table? How does the gas get into your car? And a lot of people don't think about that. Well, most goods in the U.S. flow by ship. And so you want the goods to flow in that are coming in, and then the things that are being exported to be able to get safely out. And AIDS navigation are an important part of that. Buoys, day marks, ranges, and lighthouses as well, all part of this system.
With GPS, you did navigational system. With GPS, are they still needed? I guess is the question.
They are. I was a classically trained Navy navigator and sailed on sailboats navigating. And one of the things you always learn is you want as many lines of position to tell you where you are as possible, because you never know what's going wrong. And so even today, professional mariners, as much electronic information they have from GPS and electronic charts, will still take a look out the window of the bridge and say, the light is where it should be. I am where the box is telling me. Because the box can be wrong sometimes. So professional mariners still use it.
What does the light tell them aside than, hey, there's a light on the hill here?
You know exactly where that is geographically, so you can take a visual bearing to it, and that gets plotted on the chart. And if it goes where the position where you think you are, then it's a good chance that you are there.
Well, how big is that house that you folks live in over there? 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 4-bedroom?
Three bedroom.
2-bath?
3-bath.
3-bath.
Yeah.
And then there's a little cottage off to the side.
Small 1-bedroom guest cottage that was built as barracks when it was a communications station during World War II.
Oh, really?
People stood watch there, intercepted Japanese code from Japanese merchant ships, and so there were people 24/7 standing watch there, and then they would sleep in the guest quarters that are there.
And your building that your home that you call home, was that always your home? Was that always a Coast Guard home, or was that an office or communications hub at one point?
It was originally built for the lighthouse keeper. He used to. The original keeper lived in Kaimuki, would walk to work every day. Not an easy thing, and eventually the government found the monies to construct the house and. Remind me of the year, 1921. Right.
Well, the walk must have kept him fit, though.
I'm sure, as well as going up that light every night to make sure
Yes.
that it was before they automated it or before it was electric. It was kerosene.
Okay, so how does it work now, Gary? How's the light work now?
So it runs on a computer box that tells it when to come on and off. And it has a photo sensor so that it comes on after it's been dark a little bit of time, about 10 minutes. That's so passing clouds don't make it come on and off. And so it comes on and it runs on electricity. It's a small light bulb about the size of your thumb, 1,000 watts. Because of the magnification power of the lens, it can be seen for 18 miles.
Wow.
And so now it's called an occulting light, which means it flashes on and off, but it's more light on than off. And it's all done by a computer box that
Does it
times
spin around?
It's not a rotating light, it's just on and off.
Okay.
All of the lights here on the island are flashing, not rotating.
We have other lighthouses?
We do.
Where
At
where-
Barber's Point. That one was actually, the original lighthouse was built in the 1870s. The current one was built in the early 30s.
How big is that? I've never seen that.
I'm not sure how tall it is, but it flashes every 7.5 seconds, and it's bright enough that you can see it from our house.
Is that in the Coast Guard station?
It
over
is
there?
not. No, it's just near the industrial park near Germain's Luau.
Oh, I know where it is. Yeah, now yes, I've
there
seen
by
it.
itself.
Yeah.
We also have on, these are major lights, is Makapu'u up on the side of the
Yes.
cliff. And
Is that still functional?
it is still functional, can be seen for 27 miles. It is known as, the classification of the lens is hyper radiant. It's the largest one in the U.S.
Wow. Tell me, we talked about briefly, tell me about Barber's Point. We kind of know about the Honolulu Coast Guard Station. You do your search and rescue out of there. You have there's so much we could talk about. Your Marine security detachments that provide all security when the president comes out, and the repair work and all the things you do there at the home base. It's a little treasure, really. Got swimming pool, ball fields right there down on the ports, kind of tucked away. But what about Barber's Point? You have an air wing out there,
We
right?
do. We do. We have an air wing out there. My air component commander for the Central and Western Pacific is there at Barber's Point. They have 4 short-range helicopters and then 4 long-range C-130s. And so whether someone's in trouble close to home or halfway across the Pacific, I've got the assets that I can get on scene.
See, that's what we associate Coast Guard, the search and rescue. That's most common comes to our mind, unless you're a boater. Then it's, do I have enough life jackets in, right? But the search and rescue is mostly driven, or actually probably driven from Honolulu, I guess, but it's deployed from there, Barber's Point, the helicopters and C-130.
Correct. They're either coordinated here in Honolulu or in Guam as well. There's another search and rescue area in Guam. And sometimes cases come up in Guam. The Navy helps us out. Either they've got short-range helicopters. Sometimes if I need long-range support, I can ask for a P3 or a P8 if we can't get our C-130 out there in time.
You know, the recent crash of the Osprey demonstrates to us how, 2 things. One, how important training is and how valuable training is. As an old Marine, the thing was, the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. Meaning our folks need to train. Your folks, it's very dangerous what they do, being deployed out of the helicopter down in seas. I watched Deadliest Catch a few weeks ago. And I'm telling you, it had to be a Coast Guard training exercise, kind of its reality TV, because the guy they lifted up looked like a dummy. Okay, so they were on these heavy seas in the the Arctic, I guess it is.
Probably
right?
in the Bering Sea.
Bering Sea, up there. Heavy seas, 20, 25 feet, and a guy got hit by a cage, supposedly. So the Coast Guard was on station, and they lowered the winch. They lowered the diver first, but he landed on the deck. They kept the light line to the ship, and then they lowered the thing down, put the guy in there. It looked like a dummy. So I'm guessing now the Coast Guard was using this as a training mission. Then the dummy went up, and then the guy went back up. But training's dangerous. That's a very dangerous evolution. The winds are blowing. Are you a pilot?
I'm not. I'm a ship captain.
Ship captain. I'm sorry.
But I have spent time with those pilots in the air, and it is no easy feat.
The winds are blowing. The ship is going, and they've got to kind of maintain steady, looking straight ahead, right?
Never mind while the ocean is not staying steady.
Yeah. A few years ago we had a tragic Coast
did.
Guard accident, and I know I never found out what happened with the investigation. What did the investigation? Are you familiar with it? I'm not.
I am not totally familiar with the loss of the 6505. I will say is that we went through a period where we lost a number of aircraft. We lost a C-130 down off of California. We lost an H-60 on the West Coast. And what that caused us to do was really take a look at our aviation program from beginning to end, and were we training properly, and what were our pilots responsible for. And one of the things that we found was that rather than focusing on their primary missions, that is being a pilot in command or an instructor pilot or a co-pilot, whichever their gradation that they are, or even a flight examiner, that they were busy worrying about getting a master's degree and some other things like that that were distracting them from their primary missions. And so we holistically just regrouped and have been lucky. We've preserved the amount of training time. When we went through sequestration last year, we had to make some priorities on what we were going to do, and more importantly, what we weren't going to do. And one of the things that we left that we weren't going to undo was the level of training, was for that exact purpose. Because if you can't perform your mission, it doesn't matter. And so that's how we handled that.
Well, believe it or not, we're just about out of time. We could sit here all day. I've known you for years, but it's the first, or 2 years, but it's the first extended conversation we've ever had. I got 30 seconds left. Gary, I'd like to get, in 10 seconds, your thoughts about your 2 years in Hawaii.
I think the thing I will take away is a sense of ohana and the prioritization of what's really important in your life.
Admiral?
I can explain it by the guy who came to look at our household goods. He got out of his car, his wife was there, and they both put their arms around me and they said, we're going to miss you, even though I didn't know them.
And on that note, we're going to end. Aloha.